When I went to college, I got to meet a bunch of new people, right? People from different ethnicities, people from different backgrounds. And I grew up on a really small island. So it was really refreshing, but also really shocking because I didn't know such people like this or like how they think, like their thought process was really shocking to me. I don't know if I want to say this is a skill, but when I talk to someone, I can easily tell if they're an only child. I think if you have siblings, you know what it's like. But when I would talk to people who don't have siblings and they're the only child, they just have a very different childhood from what I had as someone who had two brothers. They didn't have to do the covering the TV and while you were running away with the remote, or they didn't have to fight for the shower, or they didn't have to fight for the last bite. So it was really interesting because they're very relaxed with life, but also I noticed that they don't really know how to share. For people with siblings, it's really easy to share because that's one of the things that we learn really early on as a child. You learn to share with your siblings regardless of you liking it or not. When I go out with my friends, it's really easy for us to share because we have siblings and we just grew up sharing our entire lives. So even when we go out to eat, we always share a meal, or like if we're that close, obviously. But I've noticed that people who are only child have a hard time sharing because they think it's gross. And I'm like, oh, for me, I just like, I don't know what else to say because it's like, oh, you think I'm gross? But for me, that was my whole life. We just grew up sharing and we just grew up always trying each other's meals and stuff like that. People who are the only child, you can just tell. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I just developed that skill unintentionally because by college, I was meeting so many different types of people. And when I would go to like social events or when I would go to classes and meet different people, I'm like, I feel like they don't have siblings. When the topic comes up naturally, I'd be like, oh, like, do you have any siblings? I would say 99.9% of the time, I'm right. And that's a skill that I unintentionally developed. But there was one case where I was wrong and I was so flabbergasted. But there was this guy that I knew in college and he was so thoughtful, so considerate, so generous. And I was like, oh yeah, there's no way that this guy's an only child. Turns out he was an only child, but his childhood was very different because he grew up with a lot of his cousins. So his cousins were basically his siblings. I think that's the only rare case that I've seen that an only child doesn't behave like an only child. And I was really surprised, but I was like, oh, I see how that can work out because even my cousin's an only child too. She spent her childhood with us, like me and my brothers. So she doesn't feel like an only child to me personally. She definitely learned that skill early on too. And I think that just shaped her into who she is now. When I met the guy from college, he gave very like I have siblings vibes, but he didn't have siblings. And I was so like shocked. But that was the only rare case. I also noticed that people who have siblings, but they have a really big age gap, the youngest child usually acts like an only child. I wonder why that is because I've seen people who are like that, and I think it's because there's such a big gap in their sibling years. Like that person kind of grew up as an only child, and this second baby also grew up as an only child. I'm sure their parents spent a lot of time to this baby. So I think that's why. For me, like my brothers and I have a 5-year age gap, and I've seen people who have like maybe 7 and maybe 10 years of an age gap, and that's when they usually kind of feel like an only child. I don't want this episode to sound like I'm slandering only children, but as someone who has siblings, it's really hard for me to imagine dating someone who is an only child. I think it's because I'm the oldest child. If my partner doesn't get along with my brothers and my family, that is a big problem for me because I care a lot about my family, and I would really hope that my partner and my brothers also get along really well. I've had some talking stages with only children and it was weird. I gotta say, it wasn't what I thought it was. And when someone tells me they're an only child, I don't know why, but it just instantly disinterests me. Like I'm no longer interested. Maybe that's like my perception because I haven't really met many people who were like the guy I met from college. But the guy I met from college really shook me and really changed my perspective. But it's not all only children that behave like him, so I thought it was really interesting. But if you're an oldest daughter or an oldest son, if you're dating an only child, I wonder what that's like. Can you like tell me, like, what is it like? I'm actually really interested to know, so please let me know in the comments. When I imagine myself to do it, I think it's just really hard, but I wouldn't mind dating a youngest child because I've seen so many good cases how the oldest daughter can actually be taken care of by the youngest child. I'm sure it's good for some people, but for some people, I've also read that it's good that the oldest daughter dates the oldest son and they usually get along really well. But I don't know. I'm actually not dating anyone right now, but I'd love to hear if you guys are married and if you have a success story and what you recommend oldest daughters, because I'm interested. I really want to know. But yeah, that was just my little thought of the day for my oldest daughters and my oldest children. Can you also tell if someone is an only child, or is this just me? I noticed that my brothers also have that. They also know like, oh, that person is an only child. I've also talked with other people who have siblings and they also said that they can tell, like they have a little radar. And I thought it was funny. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. And thank you so much for listening to this episode. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.